I want to give a special shout out to my patrons, to my Bibliosprand, Bibliosworn, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means a lot to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be the third episode of my SFF Spotlight. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is a section on my channel where I will give spotlight to new cover reveals, new book announcement, new release date, and also new special edition. And today I will be giving spotlight to 14 announcements. And the first one will be for the Lost Medal, again just like the previous episode of SFF Spotlight, but this time it will be for the US cover art. So now the US and the UK cover art for The Lost Medal by Brandon Sanderson, which is the fourth book in Mistborn Era 2, has been revealed. And I think I personally prefer the UK cover art, but this is what Brandon Sanderson and also the artist Chris McGrath has to say regarding the cover art for the US edition. Brandon Sanderson said, "We are excited to be working with the talented Chris McGrath again on the cover for The Lost Medal. Chris is a legend in the field. I love how he's brought the characters to life, and I look forward to you all being able to read the novel." And the artist Chris McGrath said this, "I remember it was about 15 years ago I came across the hardcover of the first Mistborn book while cruising the sci-fi fantasy section at Barnes & Noble. The darkly fantastic John Foster cover had drawn me in at the time and had piqued my curiosity about the book further, so I decided to look up the author and some reviews. It sounded right up my alley and had been looking for a fantasy series to read that was a bit different, so I bought the book. Just a few chapters in and I thought to myself that I would have loved to have done the covers for these books. As if the fantasy gods had heard my prayers, I was offered the chance to work on the paperback editions of the books. I was so excited and, as it turns out, insanely lucky as well to have had the chance to work on this series in Brandon's truly epic world. Being able to do 7 covers for the series has been a dream and so enjoyable. Again, I've been very lucky to have worked on a series of this magnitude, so I would like to thank Brandon and everyone at Tor for this opportunity." And the next announcement is again for another cover reveal, and this one is for The Emperor of Ruin by Django Wexler. So this is the third book in the Burning Blade and Silver Eye trilogy, which reminds me that I still have to read the sequel to Ashes of the Sun, which I really enjoyed. This cover art, just like the previous 2 books, is done by Scott Fisher and it looks amazing. I mean, the entire trilogy, all the cover art are some of the best that I've ever seen in fantasy, and I am so looking forward to reading the second book, Blood of the Chosen, and also this one. And speaking of this series, the first book, Ashes of the Sun, is currently on discount. I think the price is currently £1 for the entire month of June in Amazon UK. So if you're in the United Kingdom and you haven't read Ashes of the Sun yet, I highly recommend it, and this is an incredibly cheap price. So yeah. Then next we have Dead Country by Max Gladstone. This is a book announcement and also a cover reveal. So this one is the first book in the Craft Wars trilogy. So this will be the beginning of a new trilogy which takes place after the previous 6 books in the Craft Sequence series. The cover art to Dead Country is done by Goni Montes, which also illustrate the cover art for the 6th book in Craft Sequence, which is titled The Ruin of Angels, and I think it looks really good. This is what Max Gladstone has to say regarding Dead Country. Dead Country is the end of something and the beginning. The Craft Wars trilogy will bring the big arc of the series to an epic conclusion. But Dead Country is also a great jumping on point in my opinion, with a tight focus that grows with the story and characters. As for the Dead Country vibes, it is with West, small town property work, trauma, bonding, family, giant law magic battles, wasteland of leaky craft ordnance, oh no, I'm in danger, big city necromantic wizard lawyer in small country town. So I have mentioned that I've read only the first 2 books in the Craft Sequence series, and although I really enjoyed the first one, I find that I was disappointed with the second book. I'm still not sure when I will continue with this series yet, but I'm hoping that if I do end up continuing with the Craft Sequence, which is to read from the 3rd book, I hope that it will click with me more, just like the first book again. And then next we have The Spareman by Mary Robinette Kowal. So Mary Robinette is mostly famous for her work on the Calculating Stars, and the cover art to The Spareman is done by Jamie Jones, which is one of my favorite artists. And plus, in this cover art, there is a cute looking dog. And I'm not gonna lie that it is one of the reasons why I'm giving a spotlight to this book. And then next we have news regarding Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. So for those of you who don't know, Legends and Lattes has been picked up by Tor Books for a duology. Yes, there will be one sequel, not so direct sequel, but it is a sequel that takes place in the same world as Legends and Lattes, and it will feature cameos from the first book. And Travis Baldry has revealed the cover art to the US edition, and it is basically the same cover art as the self-published edition, but it has a new typography done to it. I think Legends and Lattes, the traditionally published edition, will be released within this year as well. I think it is due to being published in fall fall 2022. And now we're moving on to self-published fantasy news, and the first one is a big one. This is a reveal and a release date for Cradle number 11. It is Dreadgod. Yeah, Dreadgod by Wight. This is the penultimate installment of the Cradle series, and the official release date for Dreadgod is 5th of July. So yeah, that's about a month from now. Not long. And the pre-order will begin at June 21st. And speaking of June 21st, the next news is about a Mage of No Renown by Kade. So the cover art for this one is done by Chris McGrath, the same cover artist who did the cover to the Lost Metal US edition that I just mentioned earlier. And this will be a prequel novel to King's Dark Tiding, which is a very popular self-published fantasy series by Kade. The author stated that this book follows our favorite battle mage, journeyman Wesson, from childhood until he meets up with Reskin and the crew in Reign of Madness, which is King's Dark Tiding Book 2. While this book can be read as a standalone or before King's Dark Tiding, it fits best between King's Dark Tiding between Book 4 and 5. You get to see a bit of what's happening in Ashai during the time Reskin is in training at the Northern Fortress, and some of the questions you might have had about King's Dark Tiding may be addressed. I actually haven't read King's Dark Tiding yet, but this is a very, very popular self-published fantasy series, and it has been gaining a lot of great reviews actually. But at the same time, I also heard from quite a lot of reviewers that this book featured a very, very powerful protagonist, or in some other words, a Gary Stu. So I don't know whether this is true or not. I'm not sure when I will get to this one yet. But if you're a fan of King's Dark Tiding, I assume that this news will be very important for you. And the next announcement is for a debut by Joshua Scott Edwards. This is an epic fantasy novel, and his debut will be titled An Ocean of Others. And this is the first book, or the first dance of the sibling sons. The cover art is done by Felix Ortiz, and the cover design is done by Sean King. Yes, the famous duo of the self-published fantasy industry. And this is the premise. Remember what's real, or your head will be theirs. Survival is never easy, but it's never been harder for Grim, the last bounty hunter in Lewokin. He survived the great riot that killed Lewo by the thousands, endured the bloody chaos that ruled the city in its aftermath, and avoided the crushing fist of the agency created to quell the unrest. Rule of law returned, but following the rules doesn't put food in your belly. On a job gone wrong, Grim stumbles into a conspiracy that targets Ulken, the head of the agency, a man who has done more to ruin Grim's life than any other. Struggling to earn honest coin, Grim plans to use the information to rise quickly through the ranks of the organization so an empty purse never worries him again. He becomes a finger of the agency, joining a sardonic ranger, two fugitive siblings, a stone-skinned scarred dwarf, and a powerful dark mage, none of whom know any better than Grim what they've gotten themselves into. Grim's hand soon discovers the agency furtive work is far deadlier than hunting bounties. While fighting to save his home from monsters who once were men, Grim discovers the conspiracy runs deeper than just Ulken and the agency. What was unleashed is spreading, and if Grim's sanity doesn't prevail, it will consume the minds of the Bright Empire and beyond. I love the cover art to this one, and I am quite intrigued about this. Maybe I will check it out, I hope, within this year, but again, I'm not making any promises. And the release date for this one is September 6, 2022. So yeah, within this year. And if I'm not mistaken, and if you're interested in getting the advanced reading copy of this one sooner, I think all you have to do is sign up to the newsletter. And then the next news is about Mother of Learning by Nobody 103 or Dobagoj Kurma. Great Mark, the publisher, recently has announced that they have finished the end papers for the book, and they're looking awesome. The front end paper is illustrated by Daniel Kamarudin, and the back end paper is illustrated by Asur Bisoa. Although the Kickstarter campaign for the Mother of Learning hardcover edition has been finished, but it is still possible to pre-order the book. I am honestly in a huge dilemma on whether I should get this or not. Aesthetically, I definitely want it, but I haven't read the book, and although it is a timeless science fiction and fantasy novel with super positive reception, I also have spent way too much money on books this year so far. Right now, the book is on and off my shopping cart. The hardcover costs $35 plus $25 international shipping fee, which isn't too bad for international shipping. So I guess we'll see whether I will cave in and buy this one eventually or not. And speaking of Kickstarter, the next news is about Petrik Rothfuss and Sean Spitzman's new project. So this is for Digger Unearthed, the complete 10th anniversary edition by Ursula Vernon, which will be released by Underthink Press. The Kickstarter was funded just within 5 minutes, and Underthink Press is the brainchild of Petrik Rothfuss and Grim Oak Press. While they will be producing original Tamaran content as well as special editions of beloved science fiction and fantasy titles, Pat and Sean have dedicated their resources and passion for literature to revive out-of-print books so readers can continue to enjoy these important works. Underthink Press has a mission of 3 parts: to bring a book back into the world that have fallen out of print, so just like the Broken Binding, to shine a light on underappreciated or forgotten books, and finally to give Pat a place to publish some of the stories he wants to tell. They also want to create beautiful books, make the world a better place, help people build beautiful libraries. They're aiming for the moon, but they're starting under the ground with Digger. I will have to say though, honestly speaking, although this project looks really good, and I really love what Petrik Rothfuss is trying to do with this, with Underthink Press here, but the international shipping fee has to be fixed. It's messed up. I mean, it costs $100 for one book. That doesn't make sense. Just to give a bit of a comparison here, Sanderson's Secret Project, which consists of 4 books, has an international shipping fee of $140 in total, and I consider that pricey already. This one is $100 for one book, not counting the price of the book itself, and not to mention custom fee as well, so there is no way I could afford this. In the meanwhile, there is also a project by Will Wight for a hardcover edition for his Cradle series, and Will Wight, a self-published fantasy author, offers a huge discount to ease the shipping fee, especially for international readers. Seriously, for 3 hardcovers, I only have to pay $25 shipping fee, and that is insane. That is insanely cheap and affordable. And so, obviously, I backed it. And finally, the last section of SFF Spotlight, which will be about new noteworthy release, and I have 4 books to talk about here. The first one is Prelude to Ashes by Thiago Abdalla, which is out now, and you can actually get a free ebook of Prelude to Ashes by signing up to the author's official newsletter. A Prelude to Ashes is a prequel novella that takes place 100 years before the author's debut novel, which is A Touch of Light, the first book in the Ashes of Averin series, and I think this one, and I know several reviewers who have read this book actually consider this to be a great starting point for the series. Plus, the majority of them love the novella as well. So yeah, consider checking this one out, plus it's free anyway. And next, Lightblade by Zamil Akhtar, which I talked about in my previous episode of SFF Spotlight, and apparently I didn't know about this, but this book has 4 interior artworks and they look so good. The interior artworks are done by Rashad Al-Akroka, and now I definitely have to check it out even more. Even though the premise sounds so good already, having an interior artworks always intrigue me even more. And then The Last Stand of Mary Goodcrow by Rachel Aaron is also out now, and although I haven't read this one, judging from my experience with Rachel Aaron's books, I think it's really worth checking out. Plus, my co-blogger has really loved this one, and if you somehow still haven't read any of Rachel Aaron's books, I highly recommend them, especially Heart Strikers, which reminds me, I still have to continue with DFZ and also Eli Monpress by her. And finally, the last news on this SFF Spotlight is about The Sons of Darkness, which I talked about in my first episode of SFF Spotlight by Gourav Mohanty. So this book is supposedly Indian first grimdark epic fantasy, and it is out now. And this is the official premise for Sons of Darkness. This is Game of Thrones meets Mahabharata and Ramayana. Some ballads are ink in blood. Bled dry by violent confrontations with the Magadhan Empire, the Mathuran Republic simmers on the brink of oblivion. Krishna and Satyabhama have put their plans in motion within and beyond the Republic's blood-soaked borders to protect it from annihilation. But they will soon discover that neither gold nor alliances last forever. They are, however, not alone in this game. Mati, Pirate Princess of Kalinga, has decided to mend her ways to be a good wife, but old habits die hard, especially when one habitually uses murder to settle old scores. Brooding but beautiful Karna hopes to bury his brutal past but finds that destiny is a miser when it comes to giving second chances. The crippled hero turned torturer Shakuni limps through the path of daggers that is politics only to find his foes multiply, leaving little time for vengeance. Their lives are about to become very difficult for a cast of sinister queens, naive kings, pious assassins, and ravenous priests are converging where the Son of Darkness is prophesied to rise, even as forgotten gods prepare to play their hand. So I haven't read Sons of Darkness yet, but The Song of Ice and Fire meets Ramayana is super great pitch. I definitely will check it out. So yeah, that's all the spotlight from me today. Let me know what you think about these news. And as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. And of course, lastly, I want to give a special shout out to my patrons and my new bibliomancer, Nanette. Thank you so much for supporting me.